Welcome back. Chapter 15, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins Meet Bruno. My grandmother carried me into her bedroom and put me on the table. She sat the precious bottle down beside me. What time are those witches having supper tonight? 8 o'clock. It is now 6:10. We've got until 8 o'clock and to get our move on. Suddenly her eye fell upon Bruno, who was still in the banana bowl. He had eaten 3 bananas. That's quite enough, the grandmother said. I think it's time we return this little fellow to his family. Don't you agree, Bruno? Bruno scowled at her. My parents let me eat as much as I want whenever I want. I'd rather be with them anyways. Of course you would. Do you know where your parents might be at this moment? They were in the lounge not too long ago. I saw them sitting there when I dashed out. Right. Let's go see if they're still there. Do you want to come along, dear? Yes, please, I said. I shall put both of you in my handbag. Keep quiet and out of sight. If you must peep out now and again, only show nothing more than your nose. Her handbag was a large, bulgy, black leather affair. She picked up Bruno and popped us into it. I shall leave the clasp undone, but still, please, stay out of sight. I had no intention of keeping out of sight. I wanted to see everything. Inside the bag, near the clasp, I stuck my head out. Hey, Bruno called. Give me the rest of the banana I was eating. Oh, all right, grandmother said. Anything to keep you quiet. She handed the half-eaten banana into the bag, then slung the bag over her shoulder and marched out of the room, into the corridor. We went down the lift to the ground floor. The lift is their way of saying an elevator. And made their way through the reading room to the lounge. And there, sure enough, sat Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a couple of armchairs with a low, round, glass-covered table below them. The Jenkinsons were the only couple that were sitting alone. Mr. Jenkins was reading the newspaper, and Mrs. Jenkins was knitting something large. Only my nose and eyes were above the clasp, but I had a super view, and I could see everything. My grandmother, dressed in black lace, went thumping across the floor to the lounge. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins? She asked. Mr. Jenkins looked up over his newspaper, frowning. Yes. And I'm Mr. Jenkins. What can I do for you? I'm afraid I have some alarming news. It's about your son Bruno. What about Bruno? Said Mr. Jenkins. Raiding the kitchen, I suppose. It's a bit worse than that. Do you think we might go somewhere private where we can talk? Private? Why do we have to do anything private? This is not easy for me to say, said grandmother. I'd much rather be upstairs in your room. Mr. Jenkins lowered his paper. I don't want to go to my room. I'm quite comfortable here, thank you very much. He was a large, coarse man. Kindly state your business and leave us alone. He spoke as though he was addressing someone who was being rude to him, like a vacuum cleaner. My poor grandmother, who was doing her best to be kind to them, now began to get a little bristle herself. We can't really talk here. There's too many people. It's very delicate. I'll talk where I dashed. Well, want to, madame. Come on now, out with it. If Bruno has broken a window or smashed something, I'll pay for the damage. One or two other groups in the room were now starting to stare. Where is Bruno? Tell him to come to me. He's already here, said grandmother. He's in my handbag. She patted her handbag with her walking stick. What the heck do you mean he's in the handbag? Are you trying to be funny? There's nothing funny about this. Your son has suffered rather unfortunate mishap. He's always suffering mishaps. He's overheating, he's overeating. You should hear him after supper. He sounds like a brass band. But a good dose of castor oil puts him right again. I've already told you. He's in my handbag. I wish we were in a more private state. This woman's mad, said Mrs. Jenkins. Tell her to go away. The plain fact is that your son Bruno has drastically altered. Altered? Said Mr. Jenkins. What the devil do you mean altered? Go away. You're a silly old lady. I'm trying to tell you as gently as possible that Bruno is in my handbag. My own grandson is also with him. So, who doing what to him? For heaven's sakes, what has happened? The man's black mustache kept jumping up and down as he yelled. My grandson saw witches turning him into a mouse. Call the manager, dear. This lady is crazy. Have her thrown out. At this point, grandmother's patience had come to an end. She fished in her handbag out for Bruno. She lifted him out and dumped him on the glass table. Mrs. Jenkins took one look at that fat brown mouse, shrieked and cried and screamed. She sprang out of her chair. It's a mouse! Take it away! It's Bruno, said grandmother. You nasty old woman, said Mr. Jenkins. He started flapping his newspapers around at Bruno. My grandmother rushed forward and managed to grab a hold of him before he swept him away. Mrs. Jenkins was screaming her head off. Mr. Jenkins was towering over us. Get out of here! How dare you! Take this filthy mouse! Help! Cried Mrs. Jenkins. Her face had gone all fish-like. All the color had gone. Well, at least I did my best, my grandmother says, as she left the room. Chapter 16, The Plan. When we got back to the room, my grandmother took me and Bruno out of her handbag and put us on the table. Why on earth didn't you speak up and tell your father who you were? My mouth was full of banana, Bruno said. What a very disagreeable little boy you are. Not a boy, I'm a mouse. Quite right, darling. But we don't have time to worry about him at this moment. We have to make a plan. In about an hour and a half's time, the witches will all be in the dining room, right? Right. And every one of them needs to be given a dose of the mouse maker. How on earth are we going to do that? Grandmama, I think you forgot that I'm a mouse and I can go places where humans can't. That is quite right. But even a mouse can't go creeping around a tabletop, sprinkling mouse maker all over the witch's roast beef without them noticing. I wasn't thinking of doing that. Where? In the kitchen, Grandmama, while their food was being ready. My grandmother stared at me. My darling child, I do believe you turning into a mouse has doubled your brain. A little mouse can go scuttling around the kitchen with pots and pans and be very careful and no one will see him. Brilliant, my grandmother said. By golly, I think you've got it. The only thing is, how will I know which food is theirs? I don't want to put it in the wrong sauce, and it would be disastrous for the other guests if I make a mistake. Then you just have to creep into the kitchen and find a good spot to hide and wait. And listen. Just lie in a dark cranny, listening and listening to the cooks, and with a bit of luck, you'll get a clue of which food is going to the big witch's party. Right, that's what I'll do. I will wait, I will listen, and hope for luck. It's going to be dangerous. Nobody welcomes a mouse in the kitchen. If they see you, they'll squash you. I won't let them see me, I said. Don't forget you'll be carrying a bottle, so you won't be near as quick and nimble. You can still be able to run fast, but you'll have a bottle in your arms. I did it just now, don't you remember? When I ran away from the Grand High Witch's room. What about unscrewing the top lid? That might be difficult. Let me try. I took hold of the little bottle using my front paws I found, and I was able to unscrew the top cap quite easily. That's great. You are a very clever mouse. At 7:30, I shall go down to the dining room for supper, with you in my handbag. I shall release you under the table, together with the precious bottle, and you'll be on your own. You will have to work your way unseen across the dining room floor to the kitchen. The waiters will go in and out of the door the whole time. You'll have to choose the right moment to nip in, but for heaven's sakes, never be seen. I'll try not to, and whatever happens, you mustn't be caught. Don't go on about it, Grandma. You're making me a little nervous. You are such a brave fellow. I do love you. What shall we do with Bruno? I'm coming with you, he said. I'm not going to miss my supper. My grandmother considered this for a moment. I'll take you along if you promise to be silent in my bag. Will you pass food down to me? Said Bruno. Yes, if you promise to behave yourself. Would you like something to eat, my darling? No, thank you, I said. I'm too excited to eat, and I've got to keep fit and frisky for this big job. It is a big job. You'll never do a bigger one again. Here he is with his bottle. Chapter 17, In the Kitchen. The time has come, my grandmother said. The great moment has arrived. Are you ready, my darling? It was exactly 7:30. Bruno was still hanging on to a banana. Hang on, just a few more bites. No, said grandmother. We've got to go now. She picked him up and held him tight and put him in her bag. I'm going to put you both in my bag, but I shall leave the clasp undone. I waited for Bruno to go in the bag first. Now you, she said. Good luck, my darling. Kissed me on the nose for good luck. You realize you have a tail, by the way. A what? I said. You have a tail, a long curly tail. I must say that never really occurred to me. Good gracious, so I have. I can see it now. I could use it. I can move it. I mention it only because it might come in handy if you need to climb around the kitchen. You can curl it around things and swing from place to place. I wish I had known this before. I could have been practicing. Too late now, grandmother said. We've got to go. She popped me in her handbag, and in the side pocket I could poke my head out just as I did before. My grandmother picked up her walking stick and walked right out into the corridor. She pressed the button on the lift to go that came up, and she got on, and there was no one on there with us. Listen, she said. I won't be able to talk to you much in the dining room. If I do, people will think I'm Dotty. The lift reached the ground floor and stopped. My grandmother walked out and crossed the lobby into the dining room. It was a huge room with golden decorations on beautiful mirrors. The regular guests always sat at their regular reserved tables, in their places, and they were starting to eat supper already. Waiters were buzzing around the place, carrying plates and dishes. Our table was a small one by the right-hand wall, halfway down the room. My grandmother made her way to it. Peeping out of the handbag, I could see the very center of the room had two very long tables on it, unoccupied, of course. Each of them carried a note fixed on a silver sort of stick that said reserved for RSPCC. My grandmother looked towards the long tables, but said nothing. She unfolded her napkin and spread it across her handbag in her lap. Her hand slid under the napkin, and she took me on top of under the napkin gently, whispered, I'm going to put you on the floor now, under the table. The tablecloth reaches to the floor. Have you got the bottle? Yes, I'm ready, Grandmama. Just then a waiter came in a black suit. I could see his legs from under the napkin. I knew his voice. It was our waiter, William. Good evening, madam. Where is the little gentleman tonight? Oh, he's not feeling well, so he stayed in the room. I'm sorry to hear that. Today there's a green pea soup, and for the main course you could have grilled filet or roast lamb. Pea soup and lamb for me, please. But don't hurry it, William. I'm in no rush. In fact, you can bring me a glass of dry sherry first. Of course, madame. My grandmother pretended that she had dropped her napkin. When she bent down, she slid me out from under the napkin and onto the floor. Go, darling, go! I was on my own now. I stood clasping the little bottle. I knew exactly where the door was to the kitchen. I had to go about halfway around the enormous dining room to reach it. Here goes, I thought. Like a flash, I skittled out. I had no intention of going across the dining room floor. It was far too risky. My plan was to cling to the skirts of the walls and all the way around and reach the kitchen door. I ran. Oh, how I ran! I didn't think anyone saw me. They were so busy eating, but to reach the door to the kitchen, I still had to cross the main entrance from the dining room. I was just about to do this when in poured a great flood of females. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the bottle. At first I saw only the shoes and ankles of these women, but when I glanced up higher, I knew exactly who they were. The witches had come to dinner. I waited until they all had passed. I dashed towards the kitchen door and waited for a waiter to open it. He opened it, and I nipped in after him and jumped behind a garbage bin. I stayed there for several minutes, just listening to all the talk and racket. Golly, this kitchen was! The noise, the steam, the pots, the pans, the cooks, the clatter, the yelling from waiters to cooks. 4 soups, 2 lambs, 2 fish, table 28, 3 apple pies, 2 strawberry ice creams, number 17. Not far above my head was a handle stick from one of the garbage bins. Still clutching the bottle, I gave a leap, turned somersault in the air, and caught hold of the handle with my tail. Suddenly, there I was, swinging to and fro. It was terrific. I loved it. I loved how I was a trapeze artist. The only difference was that this trapeze could only swing back and forth. My trapeze, my tail, could swing me in any direction I wanted. Perhaps I would become a circus mouse after all. Just then, a waiter came in with a plate in his hand, and I heard him say, The old hag on table 14 says it was too tough. She wants another portion. Give me her plate. They dropped it on the floor. Excuse me, sorry. I saw the cook drop the meat on the floor, slap on a little bit more of the gravy, and say, Come on, boys, give her more gravy. They carried the plate back out of the kitchen. Do all cooks do this? Do kitchen boys spit on ladies' plates? Let's see how she likes that. Quite soon, a waiter came in and shouted, "Everyone in the big RSPCC party wants soup." That's when I started sitting up and noticing. All ears now. I edged a bit farther around the garbage bin so that I could see everything. A man with a tall white hat, who must have been the head chef, put the soup for the party in a big silver bowl. I saw the head chef place a huge silver basin on the wooden side bench that ran along the whole length of the kitchen. Into the silver basin was going to be the soup just for the women's party. So that's where I'll have to put the stuff in my little bottle. I noticed that high up on the ceiling above there was a small crammed shelf full of saucepans and frying pans. If I could somehow climb up there, I thought, then I'd be directly above the silver basin. But first I somehow had to get across to the other side of the kitchen, upon the middle shelf. A great idea came to me. Once again I jumped up and hooked my tail around the handle of a garbage bin. Then, hanging upside down, I began to swing higher and higher. I was remembering the trapeze artists at the circus I had seen last Easter. They would swing higher and higher and higher, and they'd go flying in the air. So just at the right moment, they would grab the next swing. I let go with my tail, soared across the kitchen, and made a perfect landing on the middle shelf. My golly, I thought, I'm a marvelous mouse. No one had seen me. They were all far too busy with their pots and pans, and from the middle shelf I somehow managed to shimmy up a little water pipe in the corner, and in no time at all I was on the very top shelf, under the ceiling, among the saucepans and frying pans. I knew that no one could possibly see me up there. It was a super position, and I began working my way down that shelf so I could be directly above the silver basin. I put down my bottle and unscrewed the top, and crept to the edge of the shelf. The next moment one of the cooks came along with a gigantic saucepan of steaming green soup, and poured the whole lot into the silver bin. "Soup for the big party, ready to go out?" I had Then a waiter arrived and carried the silver basin away. I had done it! Even if I had never gotten back alive to my grandmother, the witches were to be going to eat the mouse maker. I left my empty bottle after I unscrewed the lid and poured it into the bin. Left it behind, on top shelf. It was much easier to move without the bottle, and I didn't need it anyhow. I began using my tail more and more. I sprung from handle of one saucepan to the handle of another, while far below the cooks and waiters were all bustling about, kettles and steams and pans spluttering. Oh boy, this is fun! What fun it is to be a mouse! What an exciting job! What marvelous from swinging from handle to handle! I was enjoying myself so much I forgot that I was in full view of everyone in the kitchen, glancing upwards. What came next so quickly, I had no time to save myself. I heard a man yell, "Mouse!" I caught a glimpse of the white-coated figure with the white hat, and there was a flash of steel, a carving knife whizzing at me. I was falling headfirst for the floor. Even as I fell, I knew just what happened. I knew that the tip of my tail had been cut off by the knife. I crashed into the floor. Everyone in the kitchen would be looking at me. "Mouse! Mouse! Catch it! Get it!" I hit the floor and jumped up and ran for my life. All around me they were stamping Blackfoot. Stamp, stamp, stamp. Dodging and running and twisting and turning, I was trying to get out of the kitchen. "Get it! Kill it!" The whole floor seemed to be full of Blackfoot stamping away as I dodged, swerved, twisted, and turned. I ran up the trouser legs of one of the cooks and just clung to his sock. "Hey!" one of the cooks yelled. "Jeepers creepers, he's up in my pants! Hold on, boys!" The man's hands began slapping around at his own trousers. I was really going to get smashed. The only thing I could do was to go up. I dug my claws into the hairy skin of the man's leg and scuttled my way higher and higher, past the calf, up the knee. "Holy smoke!" the man said. "It's going all the way up my leg!" I heard shrieks of laughter from the other cooks, but I promise you, I wasn't laughing. I was running for my life. The man kept slapping around, up and down, as if he was standing on hot bricks. I kept climbing and dodging and trousling. "Help! Help!" said the man with the mouse in his knickers. "Get it out! Someone help me!" "Take off your pants, you silly slob! Pull down your pants and we'll get him!" I was in the middle of the man's trousers at this point. The man began to slip his trousers down, and it was dark and awful hot in his pants. I knew I had to keep going. I dashed onward and found the top of the other trousers, jumped out like greased lightning, bolted out to the bottom, and I was on the floor again. I heard the stupid cook still shouting, "My trousers! Get it! Get it! It's still in there! Please help me! I think it bit me!" I caught a flash glimpse of the entire kitchen laughing their heads off at, and nobody was noticed the brown mouse, me, flying across the floor. I buried down among the dirty potatoes and held my breath. The cook must have started taking his trousers right off. "It's not there anymore. He's gone." "You twerp! This is silly." "I swear he was there." "You never had a mouse in your trousers. You're ridiculous." The fact that a tiny little creature like that had caused such a commotion among a bunch of grown-ups made me feel kind of happy. The pain of my tail started to hurt. I stayed where I was, hidden in the potatoes, as I was sure until I was sure they'd forgotten about me. Then I crept out of the potatoes and poked my tiny head over the edge of the sack. Once again the kitchen was a regular bustle of cooks and waiters rushing around everywhere. I saw the waiter who had come in earlier with the complaint about the tough meat. "Hey, boys, I asked the old hag if she liked the meat. She said it was perfect." I had to get out of the kitchen and back to my grandma. There was only one way to do this. I must make a dash clear across the floor and out through the door behind one of the waiters. I stayed quiet, waiting for my chance. My tail hurt terribly. I curled it round so that I could look at it. About 2 inches of my tail was missing and bleeding. There was a waiter loading up a batch of plates full of pink ice cream. He had a plate in one hand and two more balanced in the other arm. He went towards the door, pushed it open with his shoulder. I leapt out of the potato sack, across the kitchen floor, into the dining room like a streak of lightning, and I didn't stop running until I was under my grandmother's table. It was lovely to see my grandmother's feet again, those old-fashioned black shoes, with her straps and buttons. "Hello, Grandmamma! I'm back! I did it! I poured it into the soup!" Her hand came down and caressed me. "Well done, my darling! Well done!" Suddenly she withdrew her hand from her bag. "You're bleeding! My darling, what happened?" "One of the cooks cut off part of my tail. It hurts like a billy-o. Let me look at it." She bent her head down and examined the tail. "You poor thing. I'm going to bandage you up with my handkerchief to stop the bleeding." She fished out a lace-edged handkerchief out of her bag and managed to wrap it up. "You'll be all right now. Just try to forget about it." "Did you really manage to pour the whole bottle in the soup?" "Every drop," I said. "Do you think they could put me where I can watch them? Excuse me." He says to Grandma, "Do you think you can put me where I can watch it?" "Yes," she said. "My handbag is on your own empty chair beside me. I'm going to pop you in there now. You can peep out. Bruno is in there as well, but take no notice of him. He's just eating a roll." Her hand closed around me, and I was lifted off into her lap. "Hello, Bruno." "This is a great roll," he said, nibbling on it, "but I wish I had butter." I peered over the top of the handbag. I could see the witches quite clearly on the other side of the room. Here's Grandma helping his tail. My grandmother lit up one of her disgusting black cigars and was tuckering away from into their suppers. About half of them were old people in walking sticks, but there was also families, husbands, wives, children. There were a lot of well-to-do people at this hotel magnificent. "That's her, Grandmama. That's the Grand High Witch," I whispered. "I know. She's the tiny black one sitting at the top of the nearest table. She could kill you. She could kill anyone in this room with her eyes. Look out! The waiter's coming." I popped back down out of sight. "Your roast lamb, madame. Would you like peas and carrots?" "Carrots, please," said Grandma, "but no potatoes." I heard the carrots being dished out. My grandmother's voice was whispering, "It's all right, he's gone," and I popped my head out. Surely no one will notice my little head sticking out of this. "No," she said, "I don't suppose no one will notice. I've got to talk to you without moving my lips, though." "You're doing beautiful," I said to my grandma. "I've counted the witches. There are nearly as many as you thought. You were guessing, weren't you, 200 saying? It seemed like there were 200. "I was wrong," I said. "I thought there were more witches than this in England." "How many are there?" 84. "There were 85, I said. "But one of them must have fried." At that moment I caught sight of Mr. Jenkins and Bruno's father. Look out, Grandmamma! Here comes Bruno's father! What is Bruno's father going to say?